everybody, welcome back to Author Eke. Today I have FX Regan, and he's going to introduce himself. We're going to talk about his books, maybe talk about some other stuff, you never know, but we'll kind of take it from there. So welcome to Author Eke, and I appreciate you being on.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
Anytime. So tell us about yourself. How did you, how'd you get into writing? Because it's all different from, everybody I've talked to, it's a little different on how everybody gets into writing or why do they write. Satisfaction is definitely not for the money. So
really?
Maybe the loss of money.
I've made millions already.
Oh,
man.
Not
you?
No. Maybe some other ways.
I did a Twitter post yesterday. Somebody asked about how much money they can expect to make. And I said, you can make $1 million in writing if you start with 2 million and don't work for 10 years doing anything else.
I tell everybody that on paper, I'm a multi-millionaire. Don't let me cash in though. So tell us about yourself.
So I'm a former law enforcement officer. I started as a police officer working the streets in a major metropolitan area. Mm-hmm. Did that for several years, transitioned over to the FBI. Like many people in the same area I was working in spent 25 years there. So I had a total of almost 33 years in law enforcement.
Excellent.
I got out in 2012, retired, and had a series of corporate jobs, working for 2 large corporations, one as a vice president for security and loss prevention. And then the second company, I was the chief operating officer, more of a security operation. The company was involved in security.
And I think you could probably go back for the loss prevention thing because
oh my goodness, that was, you're seeing a lot of it that we were dealing with 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's not new. This organized retail theft that's going on is just really becoming known in the big cities, and you can see it on TV. It's been going on for years.
Yeah, when they take a calculator in there with them to figure out how much they have before they'll get a felony.
I've seen it. We had in one of our California stores, these 2 mopes were in there and literally had their iPhone open and adding up to make sure they had $949 each so they could get out the door with the traffic ticket if the police ever showed up.
Did they go to the door and say, crap, I forgot to add sales tax. Put that shirt back.
Yeah.
So tell us, I'm sorry, go ahead and continue your story.
No, that's okay. So after, several years in the private sector, and the last company I was with was thinking of, doing some transitioning to maybe even being bought out. So I left the business and decided as a third act, maybe give myself a try at this. I literally sat down 10 years ago and wrote an autobiography. And as I was writing it, I was determined for it to be different because I've read a lot of crappy autobiographies by former FBI agents and cops, and they all sort of have this formula where, I went to Quantico on this date, and then I graduated, and then I went to my first office, and this was my first arrest, and then I, got a bigger arrest, and I was determined not to be that, but then it was. So I decided not to do anything with that.
Well, feel free to embellish. I mean, everybody does. So
yeah, exactly. Right. And then I realized that, I changed so much of it. I changed the name of the good guys, the bad guys. I put the cities, the action in different cities than where it really happened to kind of protect the guilty, as a supervisor of mine used to say. Yep. And I realized, look, it's already like half fiction. So why not, really fictionalize it and put it into some novels or novellas or short stories. And that's kind of what I've done, is just taken that autobiography and make it into novels.
So how many have you written
today? So far, I've published 3 novellas, and those have actually literally nothing to do with police work in the FBI. They're the kitschy little numbers about Area 51 and a detective from Metropolitan DC
Hold
Police.
on, they might be about the FBI.
Well, I purposely kept, and we'll end up talking about this. The FBI makes you go through a pre-publication review process. I know DOD does, the CIA does, the intelligence community. They make you submit your work, even if it's fiction.
Right.
And it can take a year for them to go through your work and come back with questions. And so the novellas, I was kind of testing my ability to self-publish some things and not go through the FBI. So I made them, kind of as wild and outside of anything I really ever did, and that the FBI was involved in, that I had any. If they were around Area 51, it was without me having any knowledge of it. So these things were little 120-page novellas. I did not submit them to the FBI. I just self-published them on Amazon. And then what I did was put them together and, make a one volume. So it would be, 350, 400 pages that would make it worth doing an audiobook, which I've done. And I did that just, again, to try and see how the marketplace really worked, how self-publishing worked, how Amazon KU worked. And meanwhile, I had these two FBI-centric novels that I have submitted that are longer works, more in-depth. I spent a couple years between the two of them, so probably a year each writing. I had some developmental editing help. I had some copy editing help. And those are still out there. I've shopped them around to a number of agents. I haven't got any traction yet. I've got two hits from small publishers that were interested, but I've not done that yet. Not saying I wouldn't, but so those I did have to submit to the bureau and have them come back. Everything's fine. I have questions on them, but nothing was blacked out so far.
Excellent.
And then my latest project was, about a local police officer, which again, in my author's note, I talk about, quote, the feds, and note that I don't submit them to the FBI because there's no mention of those three letters or anything to do with the FBI, anything that they work on, anything I worked on when I was in the FBI. And that latest book just dropped 2 days ago. It's called Rosslyn Station.
What's the name of it?
Rosslyn Station. And it's about a female police officer in Fairfax County, Virginia, a detective sergeant. And it's really about her trip from the Vienna Metro to downtown Washington, D.C. to go to federal court. She worked on a big case as the primary undercover that was adopted by the feds. And as she goes for the first day of trial, all kinds of hell break loose on the Metro, specifically at Rosslyn Station, which is the last stop in Virginia. And it's I wrote it as in an alternating timeline. So every other chapter is about her trip from Virginia to Washington, D.C., and then what happens. And then the alternating chapters are sort of backstory going back 10 years to her first time in the academy, some of the travail she goes through as a police officer in different positions. So, yeah.
Is that self-published or is that through a publisher?
I self-published that too.
Okay. So is your goal to, just self-publish, or I know you said you sent a couple out for looks at and see if you can get an agent to look at it, publisher. Is that your goal, or you just want to be able to put some books out there?
Yes. No. I'm not, I know I've heard a lot of, and, a lot of us talk to each other online and social media, authors and aspiring authors. And I am not in the camp that I have to have my books in the bookstore or at bookshelves. I don't really care. I'm just telling stories. I'd like for people to buy them, but if they don't, I don't, it's not that I don't care, but I kind of don't care. I don't need to be famous. I don't need to be rich. I just want to tell the story. So, I think the two that I did that are FBI centric are worthy of being traditionally published. But if they're not, in the, let's say, near future, I'll go ahead and self-publish them too. I've learned a lot about the process, and I've got a lot of contacts that can help me with it, formatting and editing and kind of trying to make it as professional as possible. And you know what, frankly, I think this is, we're seeing a new age in publishing. I think a lot of agents and traditional publishers are scrambling because this process has opened up.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of some of the more established authors, through a lot of these big, top 5 publishing companies are deciding to start self-publishing their books.
Right.
Because now the availability of getting, like you said, an editor, a proofreader, a formatter, the cover design, is so easy that, we all kind of know each other and say, oh, hey, who've you used for the cover? Oh, you reach out. Or I think the hardest thing is the marketing aspect of it. But I'm kind of in your camp where I like putting the book out because I like telling the stories. I don't have to make, I don't have to live off it.
Right.
That, but if somebody says, oh, hey, it's a good book. I like reading it. They got a little bit of entertainment out of it. Pass the time, took them away from whatever they wanted to get their mind away from. That's what I'm kind of looking for.
Right.
And I've written 2. I started a 3rd, and I stopped in the middle because then I have an idea for a historical World War I fiction book that I am knee deep in, and I think it's absolutely incredible just reading about the history of World War I and everything. So
Right.
uh, I think I might shop that around a little bit, but I think I'm going to self-publish it because it's an interesting concept. But yeah, so I'm
Are
kind
your
of in the
other
camp you
two, or
are.
your first two self-published?
No, they're through. I do it a hybrid
A,
publisher,
a
so I did
smaller,
that.
a smaller
Yeah.
press. Mm-hmm.
hmm So I did that. I just kind of maybe more control over it, but yeah, I haven't decided yet either. So how do you? So you come up with your characters. Are Do you have to do a drastic? Now I know you change their names and everything, but how much of the character is like? That's what that SOB was like. I mean, personality wise, that was that guy, but you just change the name or whatever. How do you do that, or do
Yeah,
you do
it's 100% what they're
that?
for the most part. I mean, the hardest thing for me, and I'm doing better of like writing stuff down because, I mean,
Mhm.
38 years, 40 years is a long time.
Yeah,
And, I mean, sometimes you'll have a really vivid recollection of what happened your first day on the street. And then other times something just jogs your memory and you're like, I got to write that down. It was such a good story.
yeah.
But so far I've been able to, literally, you look at this latest book, Rosslyn Station, 90% of the scenes in there, well, except with the exception of the action that happens, that she's involved in, at the metro stations and things like that. I mean, obviously I'm making that up as I go along, but some of the backstory and the characters and all of that, I mean, these are all real people and real events that happen. I just kind of take them out of sequence and,
Yep.
change who the people were and all of that, but all true stories.
You see, that is a quirky bastard. I'm gonna have to put him in a book.
The good guys and the bad guys.
Oh no! Although sometimes the good guys are like, wow, that's kind of
Yeah.
strange. So when you write, do you do? How do you research? I know I have to find. I do a lot of research. Some of the places I've been to, there's no way you could go to them right now. So you do a
Right.
lot of research. But evidently, you were FBI. You were not stationed. Were positioned or whatever. More than one place. I would assume you're all over the place. So
Right.
there's a lot of places you've been to. I know DC. You probably spent a lot of time there, especially around the Virginia area and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so far, all of my books are Washington D.C. centric
Okay.
because I know it like the back of my hand. I don't have to think about what it looks like or the streets east and west, north and south. This is the first district of Metropolitan Police or third district. I kind of know all that, so that makes it easier. The very first book I did, one of the long novels, it's still hanging out there for somebody to give me a 7-figure deal on. I did a lot of outlining, and I found that didn't really help me because I was changing it, and I was doing some research on things as I went along. So the second project through what I just published and what I'm working on now, I tend to just do like a 1-page outline, almost like an executive summary, and then I write down maybe a dozen bullet points that I really want to make sure get in there. And then I just start writing. And then I do what I call kind of a reverse outline. After every chapter, I go back and put what that chapter really turned out to be about and just keep going that way. So that when I get, toward the end of the book and I can't remember, I knew this happened before, but where did it happen? I can just go up to my kind of reverse outline and go, that's chapter 14. And that's what these two guys talked about. And then I do tend to kind of stop in the middle as I'm writing to do some research. And a lot of it's, Google. If I'm, I know a lot about guns, but I can't remember if, a Springfield operator has 7 or 8 rounds. I can't remember. So I have to go to Google and look that up. So I do a lot of that, it's time consuming, and you can go down rabbit holes when you convince yourself you're just going to do research and look up the number of rounds in a magazine, and then you end up on ESPN or something like that. But yeah, so I do a lot of research as I'm going along.
Well, neither could the guy that Clint Eastwood. You feel lucky, punk? How many did I shoot?
Exactly. Yep.
So
and that's what happened in this book. There's several scenes where the heroine is kind of counting her rounds, and that becomes central to the story toward the end. She knows how many she has, but she's got to be careful how she spends them.
Right. Well, evidently a lot of people that are producing movies don't read books because I guess a 6 hour has 50 rounds in a clip, which is amazing to me sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's interesting how you said that I don't outline per se either.
Right.
I just kind of start writing. But what I did do, like you in this historical fiction, is I wrote a synopsis, which is I never
Right.
wrote one before. So I wrote that, sent it to a couple people. Okay, good. Then I started. Okay, I want to talk about this, and this. I want to mention aerial combat. I want to mention gas attacks. I want to. Oh, this is what I want to do, but where do I want to put that in?
Right.
And how often do I want to put that in? So that, and I said, okay, who do I want to? Because the book is about a soldier who gets just decimated. But during the whole book, you never know who he is,
Right.
or who even try to guess who he is.
Right.
But it's just that and that. But so I do a lot of the research on that. I mean, my wife told me just quit buying books on World War One and go to the library.
Right.
So I'm like, but I got maps and everything, but because I'm fascinated, so I do a lot of research, even for my fiction books, because you have to make fiction believable,
Right.
or science fiction. So I try to do a lot. I do a lot with the intelligence community. I have never been in the intelligence community other than the Army as a reconnaissance specialist, but I'll put stuff about satellites and Newton's laws and everything
Right.
about. So I just do that. So how long is it? So it takes you a year to write a book. Do you put yourself on a timeline? Like,
No,
I'm going to do so up. I got to get it done by him. You decide whenever.
I do have kind of a calendar in my head about, okay, if I self-publish this book, when do I want it to come out? And then that kind of makes me work toward that goal.
Mm-hmm.
The first two that, I'm still kind of shopping around to see if an agent or a publishing house is interested in it. Those, I didn't give myself any time. I just wrote them, and then I spent a lot of time editing, which is actually, I hear a lot of people talk about that's their favorite part. It's my least favorite part. I would love to be able to just take the first draft and give it to somebody and say, you fix it all up and then you send it out, and kind of like James Patterson that probably does.
I can't do that. But I have found out that I edit as I go, and what I'll do is I'll write, but then I have to print it. I have to read it like a book, and I'm doing a lot more of that now in this one than I did the other two. So I have to read it and I go, okay, or no, I need to move this up here because then it makes better sense, or and then I use some tools. I don't use Chat GPT at all.
No, I don't either.
I don't. That'll take the emotion out of the book for me.
I found a really good tool for editing, and it's for everybody that uses Word. It's the read aloud function. You put it on read aloud and then have them read the book back to you. There's so many things that you never see. If you've read it 15 different print versions, you still will catch, some.
You're the second person to say that.
It's amazing. I probably, that first book that I wrote, it's 300 pages, 100,000 words. I probably reread that thing 9 times.
Oh yeah,
and found mistakes. And then I heard somebody else talking on the podcast about the read aloud function, and I did it myself, and I couldn't believe the number of things that I caught with read aloud. So now I do that all the time. It's fabulous.
That's a great idea. I mean, I like to hear it. When I get my audiobooks, I have to go through each chapter as they're reading, and I read it.
Yeah.
I go, oh no, you missed this part, or or something like that. So I do like that too. That's for darn sure.
Yeah.
So, what if you didn't write fiction? What would you like to write?
Well, you know what I do to kind of scratch that itch is I do a Substack column.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
where can everybody get it? Where is it?
It's fxregan.substack.com. Okay. Or if you just go to Substack and put in FX Regan, it'll come up and sign up for it there. Or go to my website, fxregan.com. You can sign up for everything there. But I make almost all of that is about, the police, law enforcement, FBI, topical events. I wrote an editorial about TikTok in there. I just did something last week about FISA 702, which was up for recertification because I had a lot of experience in FISA. Wrote a 4,500 word article for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, I think I'd confine my writing to that rather than trying to do a lengthy nonfiction.
Hmm.
Because your World War One book is nonfiction,
It's historical fiction.
historic. Okay, so that gives you an out. You can make mistakes in there and go, it's fiction.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's the event, the time's real. There are realistic events, but may not have been that. And I'm purposely keeping it vague.
right, right.
But
I hear you.
but I, when I said, so what is a historical fiction? So I went out and Googled it, and I had all three elements. I said, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
because
that's good.
there's some
That
nice stuff.
it keeps it safe. I mean, if you really were going to write a book about a battle that actually happened
Oh my God,
line for line,
better
then
have it ready.
you have to do a lot of interviews, and especially if it's World War One, who are you going to find to tell you what happened there? So
Yeah, I am
yeah.
working with. So I reached out to SMU, Southern Methodist University, and there's a
Hmm.
gentleman that is helped me along that worked as a professor there, but also now is at the University of Nebraska. So
Hmm.
I, just reached out to him. He's going, oh, hey, so he sent me some links to the libraries and SMU and everything to go out and look at some things and kind of read some events in there. Then I mean, my tabs on my internet browser are like there
Me too.
must be 40 or 50 of them. I
I
close
have a
some down.
little, the warning pops up at the back. You're overloaded
Yeah,
on up here,
yeah.
close some tabs.
So I'm like,
So,
I got one okay, I got to have this because I'm actually going through the timeline,
right.
but just changing some things up. Yeah, I actually have a kid's book in mind too that I would like to write. Just I don't know, probably a squirrel in
Yeah.
past life. That's for sure. So let's tell about your background. You told a little bit about it. What can you tell us about your background that so you said 20, how many years in law enforcement altogether?
It came out to like 32 and 8 months. So I say
Oh,
33
wow.
years. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's quite the period. That's from late 70s to
Early
2000s,
80s, early
early
80s
80s.
to
So
2012. Yeah. I mean, early 1980 to
yeah,
2012.
look at the events, uh, the 80s, 90s, 2000s. I
Well,
mean, look at
and
some of the big events.
if again, writing in the time frame you're writing in,
Mhm.
that first book that's out there, I'm happy to tell the name. It's called Department Echo. I'm probably not going to change it unless, again,
Okay.
Big Five comes along, throws seven figures, and says, "We love it, but you got to change the title." Okay.
Okay.
Um,
What do you want to call it?
yeah. So I had a developmental editor look at it, and he made some really good recommendations. A lot of things like foreshadowing, cliffhanging, things that things you really got to you really have to work on to make the book a thriller. But it's based on an actual event that happened in 1984. And what happens is that several years later, probably 7 years later, exactly 7 years later, the hero of the book, the protagonist, goes back and solves that murder, an assassination that happened in Alexandria, Virginia in 1984. So my challenge was, okay, everything has to be 1984 through 92 technology. You can't have cell phones. You can't have the internet. You
Nope.
can't have email. No text messaging. You got to go
No
back to those
GPS.
days.
No, none of that.
No. You're
Yeah.
talking phone booths with quarters in your pocket, and
Yep.
looking at paper maps, and talking to people a lot more than using electronics or the internet to do research.
Right.
So yeah. Yep.
Wow. That'd be a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, especially because what you're writing about,
Right.
or how did the police or federal agents communicate with one another if they could
Right.
pick up a cell phone? How
Right.
often could you communicate?
Right.
You had to go into the office. I mean, there's a lot of that.
Had to call
I
the
mean,
office.
Yeah, I remember in the Army, when I joined in 1976, and I remember I was 1979, and I was a driver for Deputy Brigade Commander, Brigade Sergeant Major. And the brigade commander had a secretary. He was a Spec 5, I think, or something.
Mhm.
Back then, it was kind of crazy. And he would go down and he would have, the brigade commander say, "Hey, I need this, dictate something." And I looked at it and go, "Wow, what is that?" That's shorthand. I'm like,
Right.
Okay, good. But then he would put a piece of paper in the typewriter, mind you, and just like he would type, but he had like a tune. It had a rhythm to it. And
Mm-hmm.
he'd get to a certain point, he'd see a mistake and rip it out, put it again and start all over again. Never use whiteout. And by about the third iteration, that thing was perfect.
Yeah.
But it was all like, I'm like, what is I mean,
yeah.
And then, how did you communicate with your family? I didn't talk to my family for a year in Germany,
Right.
The sent letter because I didn't want to, they said, at the time, the telephone company in Germany was called Hitler's Revenge because every time, all you could just put 5 marks in and just click, 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 like hello,
Yep.
click. So that's what. But it's amazing how people communicated back then. Everybody lived. I mean,
I'm sure
did well.
I'm sure I'm off on the time frames, but we even had rules in the FBI. Like if you were going to be gone more than 48 hours, you're going to go, to the beach for a weekend or something like that. You had to call in like every 8 hours. You had to call into the front desk, and tell them where you were. Did anything happen?
Really?
Anybody looking for me? Is the boss looking? Yeah. Yep. Before you left. If you went, on a 500-mile trip, you had to put in a card before you left and put down like the route number you were going to be on. I'm going to go on I-95. I'm leaving on Saturday the 8th. I'm going to travel from Virginia to Florida by this route. And it's crazy to think about back.
So you go back in the office, they go, "Oh, you've been to the beach because only half your head is suntan. The other looks like you had a phone on it."
Yeah. Exactly.
So do you keep in contact with some of your colleagues from the FBI, and what are they up to, and what do they think about you writing?
Yeah, a few. It's I don't know how long you've been gone, but it's probably the same. That every year it's a fewer and fewer, and people move on. Unfortunately, they pass away.
Right.
They move to different cities. So yeah, there's some guys that I've known for 35 years that I still keep in contact with. Yeah.
So who's the director when you were there? What, J. Edgar Hoover? It was free?
No, I'm not that old. Hoover died in 1973.
Oh, my God.
They say.
But he lingered.
Died in
But he lingered.
So the ghost of Hoover. And that was a big joke when I was there because there were guys that were Hoover era that came in under Hoover and Mr. Hoover.
Wow.
By the way, Mr.
Yeah,
Hoover.
Mr. Hoover. Now we're something miss.
But when I first joined the FBI, there was a acting director, Floyd Clark.
Okay.
Was the acting director. They were between directors, and I think Webster had just left and gone to the CIA. He's the only director who's been director of both. He's still alive too. I think he's 99 years old, maybe.
I remember him. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, he had just left to go to CIA. Floyd Clark was the acting director, and I think I may be mistaken. There might be somebody that came in that became the full-time director after Floyd Clark, but for sure William Sessions was there for a long time when I was there.
Okay.
Judge Sessions. And then he got fired for some ethical things. He was, if you haven't heard the story, he was literally taking firewood on the FBI plane to bring it to his cabin in Vermont or something like that. It was just a really bad look.
Does he know Vermont has forests?
And I'm probably wrong on the state, and that wasn't the only thing. I think there were some other.
Wow.
Director Sessions just didn't. We had this fascination with having federal judges as FBI directors, and a lot of people thought that was. A federal judge especially, it's not like they have a big staff that they're used to commanding or, leading. They usually have surrounded by a few clerks, and that's it. So a lot of them lack real leadership skills to run a 35,000 person organization.
I don't know why they don't bring up people from the ranks. I know a lot of the assistant directors are, field agents at one time, but you get up to the director, and these guys are lawyers or political hacks.
Right.
I'm like, that's just crazy.
Yeah. So after Sessions was director, Free, and of course he had been an FBI agent for several years before he became a U.S. attorney and then a federal judge. And Free was there for a number of years, and then when he left the bureau, Director Mueller I worked for a number of years.
Yep.
Probably 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, they're there for 10 years.
He was typically. It's a 10-year appointment, and Mueller actually got a congressional extension. He was there for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
But I was there 10 years at the same time he was. And, I have my criticisms of Director Mueller post FBI, like a lot of people do. I think I've said that I thought that the directors, at least the time I was there, were the right persons for the job. I mean, Louis Freeh was kind of a law and order guy with the agents. There were some things that were going on that needed to be fixed. There was a lack of discipline. I think the straw that broke the camel's back when shortly after he became director, there was an incident in Atlanta, I believe it was Atlanta, where a couple agents went out to lunch and had, 3 martinis and got back in the FBI car and hit somebody and killed him in the middle of the intersection coming back to work. Wow. And I mean, I'm not saying everybody was doing things like that, but there was a lack of discipline, and Freeh kind of threw down the gauntlet, and he wrote what was referred to as the Bright Line Memo, and it went out to every FBI employee. It basically said, these are the things that you can count on getting fired for. And it's things you should have known, lying under oath, stealing, stealing time. I mean, there was no big surprises in that memo.
Oh, wow.
But
or should it be?
No, but he put people on notice, and it did kind of straighten up things. And then I think Mueller was the director for the time. He started, I believe it was 4 days before 9/11, and literally 4 days after 9/11, there were calls to disband the FBI and create an MI5 organization to take away counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and he led the effort to have that not happen successfully.
Yeah, it's still around. So let's get back to your books for a second. So how do you market? I mean, that's a challenge. So what do you do from a marketing perspective?
It's the hardest part. I mean, I'm not great at it, and I'm never, as a law enforcement officer, you don't have to market. In fact, you're discouraged from marketing yourself. You don't, except for these cops on TikTok and some of this other goofy stuff you see. But at least during my time, I mean, you wouldn't have social media presence. You didn't advertise. In fact, the letter that you received telling you were hired by the FBI, it said, don't tell anybody about this. Don't tell your neighbors, keep this confidential between you and the Bureau.
Right.
So that's the hardest part. I have a Twitter X account. I have Instagram, email, newsletter. But it really is difficult, and it's a long tail. It takes forever to really kind of get followers and newsletter subscribers. It's not something you can do overnight. It's hard to turn on.
Yeah, I have yet. I mean, I need to get a newsletter, but I can't just pull the trigger on it.
One more thing to do, right?
I know. It's another thing.
You can spend 8 hours a day doing the marketing and not do any writing.
Easy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. Yeah, that's for definite sure. So what advice would you give, like a fledgling or somebody who wants to write, or from a discipline perspective of writing, or don't write, or when do you write, things like that?
Yeah, I'd tell them not to do it. Don't do
enough this. Of us. No competition.
Play golf. Buy a muscle car and fix it up. Do something else. But
that would be fun.
I've heard it, and it's the only way I could do it. I'm not sure I could just have any other experience. If I had been an engineer or an accountant or something like that, I'm not sure I could say, I'm spin stories. I can sit down and write this. I'm not sure I could do that. So I'd say write what you know. I mean, fortunately, I think the things that I got to do lend themselves to stories. People are always interested in look what people read and watch TV and stream and go to the movies. A lot of it is crime related, real crime, true crime, law enforcement, police, whatever. So I'm fortunate to have those experiences. But you can do that no matter what your background is. If you're an accountant, you can come up with some, interesting schemes and scams. Exactly. With Tom Clancy, right? Was he sell insurance? You figured it out.
Yeah, he was an insurance guy.
Yeah. So, but I think, if you've got a background in something, use that, leverage that even in the fiction part. That'd be what I
think Kyle Mills was an accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's crazy.
He can do it, right? He figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah. He figured it out. He's a smart guy.
Yep.
Lives in Spain. That's pretty darn smart. So you got your book came out yesterday or 2 days ago.
Yesterday
came out. And then now you got 2 that you're shopping. You got novellas out and a series.
Right.
So do you have a muscle car that you're fixing up?
No,
You play golf? No.
I wish I did. I have played golf. I'm not great at it, and I should spend. I go through phases where I'll like pick up the clubs and go to the driving range for a couple months and start working things out. And I mean, I'll never be good at it.
I just tell people I look good when I'm out there. I look like I'm good until I hit the ball. They go, "Man, you're shitty."
I got nice clubs. I have great gear that I wear, but I'm great at the 19th hole. But
I'll buy a beer or two.
Yeah, exactly.
So where can everybody get a hold of you?
So the best way is everything's on my website, fxregan.com. You can hit the links for books. You can hit the links for the newsletter, Substack, things like that. That's the best way.
Okay. So we're going to, again, thank you very much for your service and keeping us safe. So that was good. And then writing your books. And folks, go out there and check him out. Check out his books. Check out his Substack. Because I know he's, from what I could gather, you can be very opinionated, so that's good.
It comes across that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's excellent. I like that. Well, shoot. That's like, if I say something on X and you're not going to buy one of my books, I don't care.
Plenty of other books out there.
You're not going to take me outside and roll up a piece of paper and poke me in the eye with it. So I think I'm pretty good with that.
If you don't like my books, buy Travis's books. That's
if you don't like mine, then you don't like books.
Yeah, there you go.
Appreciate it. FX,
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck and Merry Christmas.
You too. Bye now.
Thank you.